Hey y'all! Welcome to Book with Kiva, the podcast where we talk about books, reading culture, and all opinions that come with being emotionally attached to fictional characters. I'm your host, Kiva. Whether you're reading on a Kindle, listening to an audiobook, or trying to get out of a reading slump, you're in the right place. Let's get book. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to because I've been talking. We're talking about romance. Come on. More specifically, we're talking about why romance readers feel the need to defend what they read. Why is romance constantly called a guilty pleasure? Why do people act like reading romance make you somehow less intelligent? And why do some readers feel embarrassed to admit that romance is their primary genre? Because honestly, I never understood it. So today, we're discussing what a guilty pleasure actually is, why romance is often looked down upon, whether readers are afraid of being judged, and why romance deserves the same respect as every other genre. Let's get into it. What is a guilty pleasure? Let's start with the phrase itself. What does it even mean? Traditionally, a guilty pleasure is something you enjoy, even though society say you shouldn't. Something you're expected to be embarrassed about, something people might judge you for liking. And honestly, I've always found that's strange because why should reading be something you feel guilty about? Nobody calls reading a thriller a guilty pleasure. Nobody whisper about reading fantasy. Nobody says, I'm embarrassed to admit I read historical fiction, but romance suddenly people feel the need to explain themselves. And that tells me the conversation isn't really about books. It's about perception. Why does romance get treated differently? I think romance get dismissed because people underestimate emotional storytelling. For some reason, many people believe a book is only serious if it's difficult, literary, depressing, intellectually challenging, or emotionally devastating. And I know romance book that has all of these things. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy a book that challenges me. And why is joy considered less valuable than suffering? God, why is a story about love considered less important than a story about war? Love is one of the most universal human experience. It is the subject of music, movies, poetry, art, and storytelling throughout history. Come on. And yet somehow romance get treated as if it's less meaningful. That has never made sense to me. Are readers afraid to say they only read romance? Now let's have an honest conversation. Oh, I read romance, but I also read other things. But that but right there. Also, I like that they're trying to prove something. It's almost like you're trying to prove that, yeah, I'm not just only reading romance. Because I think some romance readers worried if they say I mostly read romance or only read romance, people will assume that they're not serious readers, not intelligent, unrealistic, emotionally immature, or somehow less well read. And that's ridiculous because nobody expects thriller readers to apologize for reading thrillers. Nobody expects fantasy readers to defend fantasy. But romance readers often feel like they have to justify reading their reading choices. Why? If romance is what you love reading, then read romance. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need anyone's validation. If you certainly don't need to prove your intelligence through your bookshelves. Because come on, some people bookshelves are filled with self-help book and they really need help. Does reading romance make you less intelligent? Let's address this directly because I've seen people imply that romance readers are shallow, unrealistic, muddle-headed, unintelligent, or disconnected from reality. And honestly, that's one of the most unfair assumptions in the reading world. Reading romance doesn't magically erase your intelligence. It doesn't make you incapable of critical thinking. It doesn't mean that you don't understand relationship and how they work. In fact, many romance readers are incredibly analytical. Look at any romance discussion, and readers are constantly talking about character growth, communication, emotional intelligence, relationship dynamic, consent, trauma, and storytelling. Those are thoughtful conversation. Romance readers are not turning their brain off. They're engaging with the stories in just a different way. Romance is harder to write than people think. One thing I think people underestimate is how difficult romance actually is to write. A romance author has to convince reader that two people belong together or why they don't belong together, and they're just fighting the odds. That is not easy. The chemistry has to feel believable. The emotional connection has to feel real. The conflict has to matter. And by the end of the story, readers have to care enough to root for the relationship. If any of those pieces don't work, the entire book falls apart. And that's a lot harder than people give romance author credit for. Let's talk about the subgenre, Black romance. Black romance deserve more recognition because too often books featuring Black characters are expected to focus on struggle and trauma. While those stories absolutely matter, they're not the only story we're telling, and Black readers deserve joy, softness, healing, friendship, attraction, and love. And honestly, there are books, several books out there like that. And some of the most beautiful romance I've ever read featured Black characters. And those stories deserve a space too. Read what you love. At the end of the day, reading should bring joy, not stress, not shame, not guilt. If romance is your favorite genre, that's okay. If romance is the only genre you read, that's okay too. If you don't need to earn your reader's credential. You don't need to impress strangers online or any person in your group if they don't accept that. That's just okay also. You definitely don't need to apologize for enjoying stories about love because romance isn't a guilty pleasure. It is literature. It is storytelling and it deserves the same respect as every other genre. So no, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt judged for reading romance? Have you ever downplayed how much romance you've read? And why do you think romance still get treated differently from the other genres? I love to know your thoughts. Thanks for spending some time with me here on Book with Kiba. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the podcast, share it with a fellow reader. Until next time, happy reading and stay booked.